Hey guys, what's up? It's Coleggio. Today I wanted to talk about gerrymandering. You've probably seen in the news that there's this plot of Donald Trump and the Texas Republican legislature and the governor in order to manufacture new Republican congressional districts in California, cost the Democrats, and put Donald Trump and the Republicans in perpetual power in the U.S. House of Representatives. A lot of people are saying that this is sinister, that it's anti-democratic, that it's authoritarian, but I'm going to give an ultra-realist take on what's going on. And the truth, as it usually is, a little bit less dramatic than we might think and maybe a little bit more mundane than you might think. But first I want to give some background because gerrymandering is this topic. We talk about the word, we don't even know what it means. I want to give a little bit of background here. So in the United States, we have, of course, a bicameral legislature. We have the Senate where 2 senators are elected per state, and then we have congressional districts that are apportioned by population. So we have 435 of these in the United States. Each one has about 760,000 people in it. And the challenge here is that periodically these districts change. All right, so every 10 years, the US Census does a study to figure out where people are living, how many people live in a state. And one of the results of this is that sometimes there are areas that grow and areas that lose population, right? So the city of Nashville might gain 1 million people over 10 years at the expense of, the farmlands in northern Michigan or something like that. And then they have to figure out how to reapportion the congressional districts. Maybe Michigan loses a seat, maybe Tennessee gains a seat because of all the growth in Nashville, that type of thing. Now, one of the challenges here is that philosophically, you have to think about what makes a good congressional district? And unfortunately, the Constitution doesn't really provide any guidance on that. It just says that the states have to determine what those lines are going to look like and how the congressional districts are going to look. So there could be a theory that, okay, say there's a city that has 761,000 people in it. Maybe the congressional district should just cover that city. But then there's another thought, which is that, well, no, maybe you should cut the city in half. This way it's representing both urban people, suburban people, exurban people, and some farm people, right? Or some outdoors people. Is that a better way to cook it up? There are some people that believe that you should draw the congressional lines in order to encourage minority representation, right? So make black majority or majority minority districts in order to make sure that Black Americans or Hispanic Americans or Asian Americans have a better chance of getting elected. That's a theory. The Supreme Court has ruled on that. I could do 10 videos on that, but I don't want to. And then there's another idea, which is just that, well, if a state roughly has half the people are Republican, half the people are Democrat, then maybe half of the congressional districts should be Republican and half the congressional districts should be Democrat, right? There's no real hard philosophical backing for this. All there is the rules that the states need to come up with these lines. Okay, so how do we come up with the term gerrymandering? Well, back in the early 19th century, there was a governor of Massachusetts named Elbridge Gerry. Not Jerry, but Gerry. He later became President James Madison's vice president. He died in office. But while he was governor of Massachusetts, they had this question of redistricting Senate seats. Okay, and while they were looking at the maps, Mr. Gerry, Governor Gerry, realized pretty quickly that he could redraw the lines in order to gain seats for his party, the Democratic Republicans, and cost his opposing party, the Federalists. So they did this. And one of the state Senate districts apparently looked like a salamander. And there was all kinds of outrage that this is corruption. The Federalists were complaining, you're making districts look like animals. They shouldn't look like that. And they kind of said, well, tough, we're in power, we're doing it. And thus the system of drawing congressional and state legislative district boundaries was formed. And they call this gerrymandering because, like Gerry, over the course of time, the people in power, the parties in power, tend to use those opportunities when the census recounts its people, its numbers, to create congressional districts and state legislative districts that are good for their party at the expense usually of their opponent. So you might say, well, that's kind of a dirty business. Why do they do it like that? And again, the challenge is that there's not really a strong philosophical backing for what those districts should look like. In the early 1980s and the 1990s, there were a lot of court cases over racially gerrymandered districts. There was one district in North Carolina that followed an interstate for a few miles because they wanted to connect a couple of black neighborhoods to make sure that a black representative got elected. So they've been doing different types of gerrymandering all the time since the founding of the Republic. So I'll give you 2 examples, all right? This is a map of North Carolina District 10. I used to work for this congressman. It was Congressman Patrick McHenry. He later became the Speaker of the U.S. House. And if you look at this district, it looks like a crazed witch on a broom. I don't know if you can see the witch. I definitely saw it. This poster hung above my wall when I was in his office. Now I want to show you the district 5 years later, after the Republicans gained control of the North Carolina legislature and governorship in 2010, 2012. They redistricted it. No longer looks like a crazed witch, but you can see over in the western part of the district, there's that little bulbous tip. And what that was is they redistricted it so that Congressman McHenry took over Asheville, because the Democrats had taken this very Republican district in western North Carolina and they wanted to get it back. So they put the Democratic voters from Asheville in McHenry's district, and suddenly the Democrat in western North Carolina didn't have all those voters and he lost the election. All right, so this type of thing goes on all the time. Now, the first thought in your head is like, well, crap. Can't they just make this a nonpartisan process? Can't there be some science behind this that just, makes this less partisan? And the answer is no. No, not really. I'm going to give another example. This is, in theory, yes. The answer is yes, but in practice, it never works that way. So in 2010, the Democrats controlling California, along with Governor Schwarzenegger, created a nonpartisan commission to redraw the state's congressional district boundaries. Okay. Now, here's an article by ProPublica, which is a left-wing, center-left nonprofit journalism organization, talking about how Democrats basically furtively and secretly took over this nonpartisan process, put Democratic operatives into the process, and controlled it, and basically took 4 seats from the Republicans in the next election cycle, gave another 4 to the Democrats, and it was a net 8-seat shift to the Democrats in California after a nonpartisan process. All right. So even when it's supposed to be nonpartisan, the partisans figure out how to get control of the process and win it. Now, I also lived in New Jersey in 2000 and 2001. And this is 25 years ago, so I don't remember the exact details, but the governor there had proposed the same thing, a nonpartisan commission that was going to redraw the state's legislative district boundaries. And of course, there were 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 1 independent, and the independent, of course, was a secret Democrat. He sided with the Democrats on all the key decisions, and they ended up shifting a bunch of seats over to the Democrats. So, raw political power, and when it's nonpartisan, the partisans figure out a way to get in and to take control of it. It's very, very difficult to do anything otherwise. Which brings us back to 2025 and Donald Trump. The Republicans have the legislative majorities in the House and Senate in Texas, and of course the governorship, and they're exercising raw political power in order to redraw district lines and gain Republicans seats. Is this sinister? Is it anti-democratic or authoritarian? No, this is just raw partisan power politics that happens all the time. It's ugly, it's bare knuckles in back rooms, but it's what happens in this process over and over and over. And as a former Republican campaign operative, one warning I would give to the Trump people who are overseeing this process is you got to be careful here. It's very, very easy to get greedy in situations like this. But I can tell you from my perspective, I would rather have 10 congressional seats that are 60% Republican than 11 congressional seats that are 55% Republican. Those 10, 60% seats in a wave usually hold. And if there's a Democratic wave, you probably hold all 10 of those seats. If there's 55% Republican districts in a wave, you might lose 3, 4, 5 of those seats. You have a majority, but it's a far more fragile majority. And you have to ask yourself, is that really worth it in a tumultuous time like 2025? I suspect it's not, but I'm not in the Trump administration. I'm not in that world right now. And that's just my own little opinion. So bottom line, what is going on? The answer is that this is just cold partisan politics, maybe at its worst, but as it's always happened in the United States. There's no real philosophical vision that's agreed upon by everybody in terms of what a congressional district should look like. Should it be geographically logical? Should it focus on making sure that underrepresented groups get representation? Should it just look like should it politically look like the state that it represents? Well, if you believe in that last one, that, if a state is half Republican, half Democrat, it should be half Republican seats, half Democratic seats, roughly. Take a look at California. They have about 50 congressional districts there. There are 10 Republicans. All right, so only 20% of the congressional districts in California are Republicans. However, almost 40% of California voters voted for Trump. So those are clearly gerrymandered districts in California. Gavin Newsom, the governor there, is trying to do that even more because he wants to fight against Trump. He wants to be the Democratic nominee and show that he'll go to the ring with Trump and punch back. But this type of thing happens all the time. It happens by both parties. And it's one of the raw, ugly realities of partisan politics. It's cold, it's bare knuckles in back rooms, but it's the reality. And that's my ultra-realist take on gerrymandering. Would love to hear what you think. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. And thanks, and have a great day.